My favorite plant to grow in my yard is the fruit tree, because you plant it once and you get fruit for decades. If you have ever been curious on the best ways to be successful in growing fruit trees, today is your lucky day. Why? Because my team and I have compiled our best interviews and videos in one place to assist you in growing your own toe-tingling peaches and awesome apples right out your front or back door. Plus, as an added bonus, we've included an in-depth guide to successfully growing fruit trees in your yard. To get access to this information, it's free, by the way. Just go to urbanorchard.org or text FRUIT to 33444. That's urbanorchard.org or text FRUIT to 33444.
You're listening to the Urban Farm Podcast, your partner in the grow your own food revolution. Whether you've just been introduced to urban farming or you're a lifelong advocate, we're sure you'll leave feeling more informed, equipped, and empowered to dig deeper into the soil of your local food economy. With you every step of the way, here's your host, Greg Peterson.
Today on the Urban Farm Podcast, we have Penn Parmenter back to talk about her experience with high-altitude growing and greenhouses. Since 1992, Penn and her husband Cord have been growing food just above 8,000 feet in the West Mountains of south central Colorado. With many years of research and development, they founded Smart Greenhouses LLC and Miss Penn's Mountain Seeds in 2013. Together, they build smart greenhouses all over the Rocky Mountain West at even the highest elevations. Their greenhouses are 100% sustainable as they heat, cool, and ventilate themselves without the use of fossil fuel. Penn and Cord are also co-instructors at the Denver Botanic Gardens, teaching a slew of high-altitude growing classes there and around the region. Their very popular day-long sustainable greenhouse design classes held on their 43-acre property and at the Denver Botanical Gardens. Welcome to the show today, Penn.
Thanks, Greg. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited to have you. So this is actually your second time on the show. The last time we had you, recently we were talking about seeds. And today we're going to be talking about a little bit different. We're going to be talking passive design, solar greenhouses, and high altitude growing.
Indeed.
And I'm very excited about that. So let's kind of delve into that a little bit. The question I usually ask here, we did that last time. So tell us a little bit about how the whole greenhouse thing came to be.
All right. Well, that's another really fun homesteading when you're in your 20s story.
Yeah, bring it.
You have no money and no prospects.
Right.
And you have raw land, and everybody was telling us all the things we couldn't grow here. And everyone does love the tomato, and my husband was thinking, well, maybe we need a greenhouse to grow those things that everyone was telling us we couldn't grow. And we were very lucky to borrow a book from a friend from the 70s where they had done all this research on passive solar greenhouses. And my husband read it from cover to cover, and then we loaned it to someone else and never saw it again. Uh-huh. So meanwhile, we started to salvage. For several years, we salvaged some glass. We were never afraid. The neighbor had dumped 2x6s in a gully, 100 of them.
Gosh.
And we got 100 of them out of the gully. We swallowed our pride. We went over there and we asked him, and he kind of smirked and said, sure. And we built so many things with those 2x6s. And so we gathered our materials, and we had read this book, and my husband said, well, I'm just going to go from memory and see what I can do, and we'll put this little greenhouse together. And at one point he said, this is never going to work. You understand, right? This thing's going to freeze solid, and it's never going to work. And he always tells everyone that he's a skeptic, he's the realist, and I'm the optimist. And I said, well, the book said it's going to work, so of course it's going to work. And so he guessed at the design from what he remembered in the book. And we put together this greenhouse as a family, on Sundays. There's even stories of me being pregnant and moving block up the mountain past his blacksmith shop, on the cart without him knowing how many I took, because I was only allowed to move 2 a day and all that sort of stuff. And we built it, put it together, and lo and behold, the thing worked better than we could have ever imagined. And we're
I love it when that happens.
Yeah, we're at 8,120 feet, and the thing is not only not freezing, but it's cranking out food every day,
wow.
and it has been for the last 17 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was where it began, and we built it for $150 and memory, and still managed to pull this off. And, we didn't even finish the door frame. We had a gap under the door, and the snow blew in. I just threw a rug over it, and it still worked. We didn't have the balance correct on the greenhouse, and I'll go into that more, and it still worked. So, yes, we were growing warm weather vegetables in the summer and cool weather vegetables in the winter.
Wow.
So that was our first one. So that really showed us a lot of what the thing could do. So over the years, Cord's wheels started turning, and then he started working to develop the design more.
Wow.
But that's how it began, $150 in scrap materials and optimism.
I love scrap materials. I have built so many cool-looking things here on the property at the urban farm with scrap materials. So,
well, and scrap materials are becoming finer and finer, because
right.
we're realizing this and reusing them, and there's more and more sources to get them now.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can use beautiful materials to make something.
Yeah, exactly. So you use the term passive solar. And for our listeners that don't know what that means, please enlighten us.
Great. Well, technically all greenhouses are solar because the sun is a part of it. But passive solar means we are not using any active solar, no solar panels, no input, and no fossil fuel input of any kind. We don't even plug in a fan. We use physics. We use earth. We emulate Earth to do what Earth does inside of this greenhouse. So we don't even use a fan to move the air. We use natural convection. So the passive means nothing is when the power goes out, and it does a lot in the wilderness, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything because even the vents are automated with automatic vent openers, and those use paraffin wax. And as the wax heats up, it pushes open the vent, and as the wax cools, it closes the vent. So those are something that we've bought that are actually a thing that is a product out there that we've made work. But most everything else, we build everything. And my husband builds all the way down to the vents, everything. So this passive thing is all about balance and letting the sun do what it does on the earth here. It's a little analogy that I can give you that is really helpful that I teach in class is if you're on Mars, Mars is 300 above and 300 below in that 24-hour cycle or somewhere around there, right? Yeah. There's no oceans on Mars. On Earth, the oceans are stabilizing the planet so we can be here. So it's taking in that excess heat and cooling us, and then it's releasing it in the dark time, in the cold time, and heating us. So that's how we're living on the planet. Well, that's what we're doing in our passive solar greenhouses. We use stored water. We use natural convection. The stored water is our thermal mass.
Say more about that.
Okay, and thermal mass and stored water, and the reason we use water is that it is almost four times more efficient than any other thermal mass on Earth. So rock and earth and soil, those are good masses too, but they have diminishing return. You don't get back as much as it takes in.
Got it.
And it can only take it in so far, right? So maybe a foot into the earth. Well, water circulates, so it can keep taking in the heat. And it can keep on pulling the heat out of your way. So a lot of greenhouses' problems are they overheat.
Oh, right.
Well, right? So the water is pulling that heat out of your way and storing it in the water. And then it's going to chase the cold across the room at night. So as the temperature shifts, then the heat is going to be released out of those barrels of water or whatever your storage container is.
Right.
And that exchange happens in that 24-hour period. And then in the winter and the summer, it cools the greenhouse in the summer and it heats the greenhouse in the winter.
Yeah.
So the balance is what's key, and what we've learned maybe more than anything is commercial greenhouses and high tunnels and hoops, they're all glazed. glazing is any material that lets the light in. So whether it be plastic or glass, they're all glazed. Well, that means it's really good at bringing a lot of heat in.
Yes.
And it'll spike to 120, 130, and then it can't hold the heat. So it all is released back out of that glazing. So, if I tell people, well, put your plants in the woods and point a heater at it, it's kind of the same thing because it's going to go in and it's going to go out. And so when we see these big commercial greenhouses, they're going to have a cooling system on one end and a heating system on the other, and they use both in a 24-hour period, and that's just not right. That is a huge problem. It's a fuel hogging problem, especially in the West where we live.
Yeah.
Because we have so much sun, we have plenty of solar gain. We're trying to tone that down where you live. And where I live in Colorado, I'm trying to boost it up because I'm up high on the mountain and you're down in the heat of the desert.
Yeah, exactly.
So we got to balance these greenhouses to be able to handle that. And there's all sorts of parts of what makes this happen. There's a formula. I tell people, it takes us a 7-hour class to teach you that the sun heats the earth, and it's okay. It's okay. It can heat this little room, I promise. And really, one of the big problems in the West for commercial greenhouses is that they are overheating so badly, even in winter, because the sun shines all the time.
Right.
So this is a real problem, and people suffer with these commercial greenhouses. Their hearts are broken. They saved their money. They bought a kit. It's all glass, and the thing cooked to 120, and then it dropped to 17 below that night. Yeah. And they're crying on the phone to us. So that's a trick, because those greenhouses aren't meant for the desert Southwest or the mountaintop. They're meant for London, England, or Seattle, where that cloud cover and that sun isn't going to change so drastically.
Right.
So how do you combat that?
So that's what I want to know.
So the formula of these things is that one of the first things we do, we isolate the foundation. So we wrap the foundation in insulation to the frost line if we can.
On the outside?
At least 2 feet on the outside of the foundation. And we use 1 or 2 inch foam board.
Oh, interesting.
And it's straight down in the ground, wrapping around the foundation. Because now if the soil, the earth, cannot freeze under your greenhouse, you're tapping into 55-degree earth for the rest of the life of the building now, because you've wrapped it and no longer can the ground freeze inside. And that's a huge thing right off the bat.
Oh, right.
Right? So because if you put a greenhouse on top of frozen ground, you're not it's a problem. And so that's the first thing that's done. So these are permanent buildings with a foundation in the ground. And so they're not like a little kit that sits on top of the ground. It is an investment because it is a real building.
Right.
But again, once it's built, it starts paying you, because now everything you grow or make in there, you can make a little extra money with your extra plants or food or seeds to pay for whatever you need in there, and there's no fuel bill. The other thing, obviously, is angle of the glass, angle of the roof. There's a shadow line on the roof, which is really kind of an important thing. A lot of greenhouses, the entire roof is glazed.
Right.
It's way too much sun gain coming in there then. So now we're going to cook the whole room. We're going to cook the water storage that's happening in there. And instead, we put part of the roof is roofed and covered, and the other part is glazed. And that line is determined on our latitude, where we are on the planet, and the sun angles. Okay, and these sun angles you can get on the NASA's site, where they will give you where the sun is at every moment on the planet. At every, you can get all that information, and you can see where that sun window is going to be for you and where you are. And Cord creates that shadow line. And what I'm talking about is we put our water all at the back of the wall, the back north wall of the greenhouse, and we stack it all the way to the top. And the reason we use barrels is because they're only 2 feet wide. So now we have all floor space for growing, and we've stacked all our water to the back wall. So in the summer, we want the sun to land a foot in front of the barrels, not on the barrels.
Yeah.
So that's how we determine where that roof ends and glazing begins, is that we want the sun to land in front of the barrels and not cook the barrels and get them hot. In the winter, when the sun is low on that angle, we want it coming straight in the windows and hitting the back of the barrels.
Yeah.
And it's perfect. So it's actually sort of cooling in the summer, and it's heating then in the winter. So that is that balance that you determine and you find. We do cell plans on our website that we have 3 varieties ready to go. And we ask people, if you change the design from what Cord has figured out for this particular design, everything changes, because it's all integrated. Everything is working together.
Right.
The other aspect is, of course, that natural convection with venting. And venting is the biggest issue, without a doubt.
Yeah.
A lot of these high tunnels you see, they don't have any vents on the top, right? They only have the open ends.
Yep.
Well, you have these big dead air areas in the center, and the heat needs to go up and out. So they have to use fans, they have to use cooling, they have to do all kinds of things to push that air around.
Right.
With natural convection, like what would happen in a rock outcropping, is there's low vents and high vents in equal and opposite positions.
Mm-hmm.
So equal size in opposite positions. So we have vents down low in the front of the greenhouse, and we have vents up high at the back of the greenhouse, which makes the air move whether the wind is blowing or not. The air has to move. That's natural convection. And for your listeners who are scientists, please understand that we are only emulating nature. We're not scientists, but natural convection is a simple thing that we can use without using fossil fuel to benefit. And I go into my greenhouse, Greg, in the summer with a jungle of tomatoes to cool down and to feel that cool air moving past my face.
Right.
My hot face, and then that air is just moving slightly. It's not like it's a big rush, but you can feel that ventilation happening. And so planning for that ventilation is a big deal. And they don't make a lot of smart materials to do it with. I mean, I shouldn't say that. There are, but Cord custom builds everything so that it will work the way he wants it.
Got it.
Did that give you a good picture?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm actually on your website, pennandcordsgarden.com.
Yes, that's us.
And there's a latest greenhouses section, and these greenhouses are beautiful. Can you tell us? Wow, I want one.
I know, I laugh because people say that we want to come and see your greenhouses, and I go, well, I have the little greenhouse that could.
Yeah.
I have the shoemaker's greenhouse.
Oh, right, exactly.
We have the prototypes here. We are building a big one here, and it's under construction right now, and it's not finished. And I'll have 70 feet of tropical forest at 8,000 feet, and I'm out of my tiny mind, Greg, because I've been operating out of these real little greenhouses. Our first one was 10 by 13, and the next one is 13 by 15, and I produce 3,000 to 5,000 tomato plants out of those.
Wow!
And that's another story how I can tell you how I do that. But now he's building state-of-the-art, all brand new materials, all for clients.
Right.
So what he builds for clients, it is, like I said, state-of-the-art, absolutely beautiful buildings. Mm-hmm. And like we started with the scrappy,
right.
And
well,
now
of course,
we're
that's how we learn.
Yeah, and that's how we learned, exactly. And now we're upgrading, and we're going to finally have one of these bigger greenhouses so that I can grow tropical trees, and have fruit year-round.
Yeah. I love this. The first picture here, 18 by 32 foot greenhouse, says, "What a wedding gift."
That's because the couple, that was their gift to their wedding gift to each other at their wedding.
Wow.
And we finished it right before their wedding, too.
Wow.
It was a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, these are beautiful, beautiful greenhouses.
And these are mostly just people, just individuals, couples, retired folks.
Yep.
We have folks, people take our classes and build them themselves, although they're never going to be as perfect as Cord building it. I can say that right out because the dude is a genius, okay? He is a genius at this. And this is what he does, is trying to perfect this all the time. But when we teach it, people have done brilliant work to make these greenhouses. And we have a retired doctor couple that live at 11,000 feet. They moved for their retirement to 11,000 feet.
Wow.
And they built one, and they pump the heat into their home and heat their home in the winter and eat free out of it year-round and grow medicine and food in it. They said to tell everyone that it costs less to build that greenhouse to heat their home than a solar array would have. And they're happy as clams, and they were DIYers. You know, they didn't even have Cord to design it for them.
Right.
So, you know, this is using what nature and earth teaches us. This is what I think we're all trying to get back to, because we've gone so awry, so away from what is natural and good and smart and sustainable. And so, you know, the commercial business, whatever, it's hooked on that fuel bill. Right? There's a nursery in Boulder that runs their whole nursery off of a subterranean greenhouse that uses zero fossil fuel.
Wow.
And so we want to get the word out, you know, because people are starting to ask questions and say, maybe there's a better way than a swamp cooler and a heater. Yeah. Yes, there is. Well, and this technology was figured out in the 70s, and then we all went to sleep for about 35 years, and now we wake up and we go, wait, we could really use this right now.
Yeah.
And if you were like us, where we were in our 20s and getting salvaged materials at $150, and we now have a sweet little greenhouse that feeds our family, boy, it's really powerful, and it feels great to be a part of.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I can see so I'm just looking through these pictures on your website, and I can see from them how this works. You basically point the greenhouse in the northern hemisphere, you point your greenhouse south, and there's only glazing on the front of the greenhouse, and then in the back of the greenhouse you have your stacked barrels.
Right, and you know, the balance of the greenhouse is about 50-50 insulated to double glazing. And that's something I didn't mention. Any glazing needs to be doubled. No matter if it's polycarbonate, glass, greenhouse film, it doesn't matter. Double it, okay? Because double glazing behaves completely different than single.
So, when you say double it, you mean put two sheets on top of each other?
You have to have a spacer in between.
Oh,
okay, so polycarbonate already comes that way, right? So when we did double plastic, we're going to have a little wooden spacer in between. So there's a little air space in between, and that air space is your insulation.
Yeah.
So glass, double pane glass does that. It has that little space between it. So if you were using glass, use double paned, right? So anytime it's and even if you mix them up, if it's greenhouse plastic or fiberglass, it doesn't matter as long as you've made an airspace. Yeah. That's going to make all the difference. You can use the heaviest insulation you can use on the insulated parts of the building. What you see there, Greg, is that the north side and about half of the east and west is insulated.
Yeah.
It's like a shell of insulation, and then a shell of double glazing on the front. And we shift that greenhouse south to southeast just a little for us, and that's because the recovery morning sun is going to help that greenhouse recover much quicker.
Yes, exactly.
We have a ton of western sun. We're all hot by the time it gets over to the west, and we are venting off extra sun.
Yeah.
But if you live somewhere where you have a mountain or a giant tree, you could tweak it a little south to southwest if you have to. So these are the things that, you know, Cord, if he comes on a consultation and cites someone's greenhouse, these are the considerations you take in. How tall is that tree? Where does the shadow fall? Where, you know, when does the sun come up in the morning?
Yeah.
What is your sun window? These are the questions you ask to position it. And so, the overglazing thing is very common. And Cord will say what he sees the most is overglazed, undermasked, and undervented.
Yes.
Is what he sees the most in greenhouses.
Yeah.
So if you can add those things in any way, even if it's not our design or all of the math that Cord has figured out for you in our plans, we've seen success where people in Denver, where it's super hot, they have a high tunnel. They couldn't be in it at all for the summer months. I mean, it's 120 degrees in there.
Right.
So they put a line of barrels down the center of the high tunnel, and they put plants on it and made tabletops on top of those barrels of water. And then they planted on the low side of, either side of it, they planted in the ground their crops, but they were working on the barrels and growing potted things on the barrels. And they could be in it in the summer.
Oh, wow.
So, no, the balance isn't right. It isn't designed 50-50, but it allowed them to use their hoop in summer where they couldn't before.
Right.
So again, we utilize these formula of water and mass and isolation of the earth, even in our garden beds, in our cold frames. Mm-hmm. A cold frame with jugs of water in it is a whole different bird than just a cold frame.
Right.
Even that will do a huge difference.
And
so
tell our listeners why that's the case. Just get really simple and tell them why.
Okay, water is, again, the most efficient thermal mass we know in nature.
And you're using that to store heat and cool.
Yes, I'm using it to cool that little, say it was a little hoop house that you have over a garden bed, and you line the thing with jugs of water, even if they're gallons or 5-gallon buckets, whatever. All day, that water is going to be soaking in excess heat and kind of taking it away from overheating that little unit that you might have. No vents, they can overheat. Mm-hmm. And then at night, it's releasing that heat right by the plants. Yeah. Even on a small scale of a gallon of water is like a little battery, a battery you're setting right next to your plant.
Yeah.
And cooling it in the day, heating it at night, and that exchange is going back and forth.
Nice.
I know, really cool, right?
Yeah.
I like simple things.
Oh, it is so simple. And I look at, I've been doing this for a very long time. I've 40 plus years in gardening and the physics behind all of this. And I look at your designs and they're brilliant. I don't know Cord, but I can look at his designs and say, wow, I get it.
Yes. And I will tell you, he will say, I'm standing on the shoulders of these geniuses before me. Uh-huh. But they did so much work on figuring this out there, but he took it further. Yeah. And in the book that we reread all those years ago, the author said, I don't know how well these greenhouses will do up at high elevation. You may have to use supplemental heating. Well, we've taken them all the way up, and 31 below zero. That day, we went down there, okay, it's all going to be dead, right? 31 below zero.
Wow.
And it had been a week of 17 below and 20 below, and then it finally hit 31 below. And Cord and I were like, okay, let's go see our dead tomatoes. And we walked in there, and, of course, there's zones in the greenhouse. Up against the barrels at the back is your most stable zone.
Right.
Out in the edges by the glazing is the most unstable zone. Mm-hmm. So in the winter, we're going to put our tomatoes up against those barrels. That's their happy place.
Right.
And so we got 12 feet of tomatoes in there that we went into winter with. And they go all the way to the ceiling and come back down, and we walked in, and all the tomatoes up against the barrels, in the middle, were perfectly fine.
Wow.
And that's a tropical plant. Kale and broccoli can handle some cold, but not a tomato. Right. And the ones, of course, on the edges that are up against the glass, of course, were burned by the, frozen. But by then, we plant cool weather crops up against the glazing and warm weather crops at the back.
Yeah, exactly.
That switches in summer, right? So we had a little losses around the edges, but those tomatoes up at the wall, they kept going strong, and that made us both with our eyebrows up, like, these really do work. Yeah. Because after that first little greenhouse that could, as we call it, our little one, Cord built a second small one, but now he had the book back. Uh-huh. And he had really learned a lot, and he redesigned it. And that second little greenhouse is the one that went to 31 below. Wow. So the learning from one to the second was incredible. Mm-hmm. And now he's built almost 20 of them, and he is, he can't have mistakes or failures on his clients' greenhouses.
Right.
So he figures it out and improves it all the time. Yeah. You'll see the design of the greenhouses changing through the pictures because he keeps improving, the venting design or the aerodynamics, because remember, we have 120-mile-an-hour winds can come through our valley.
Oh, wow.
I'm sure you get that too.
Yeah, we do.
You can't have any flapping. Cord says no unauthorized flapping, because if something is going to catch wind, it's goners.
Right.
It'll be beat apart. So everything is aerodynamic, everything is flashed, everything is covered so that the wind cannot catch these things.
Right.
Even the vents are out of the way of the wind. And there's ways around, keeping those vents protected.
Yeah.
Because the commercial ones go flying across the valley.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure.
Lots of sad stories of folks telling me that.
Yeah.
So he's been working on this a long time, and I live it every day. I know they work, and I have food in my greenhouses every day, no matter if I pay attention to them or not. And it's a thrill, and I'm just so. I mean, the guy is pretty genius. Yes, it's true, but he's really doing something great with this because it's important how much fuel we're using in greenhouses that is not efficient in any way.
Yeah, exactly. And it looks as though this might make a good front face to a house.
Oh yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice to prop one of these right up against your house and then have it help heat the house?
Absolutely. And so attached greenhouses are another bird, right?
Right.
The venting system is completely different, and he has built several attached. And so the venting works where in the winter you're venting the heat of the greenhouse into your home, and in the summer you're venting it out. So in that book, those guys worked on attached greenhouses to heat homes mostly. Not only, but mostly. So it was really full of attached. But my husband changed the design to make single units so that he had that option, and that's what we could do here.
Yeah.
But people want attached all the time. But each one is a custom build because each home is different. It's positioned different. The wall is different, right? But it can be done. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
And it's people don't give it too much credence that a attached greenhouse could actually heat your home. I'm telling you, it could heat your home.
Oh, I'm quite sure.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And feed you. So
exactly. Yeah.
It's really cool.
Nice. So I'm scrolling through pennandcordsgarden.com, and so you have a section here, a couple of them that I want to talk about, classes and consultations. So tell us about that.
Well, we were hiding in the woods pretty good for about 16 years before we got discovered. And we got discovered by Panayotis, and that's a name of a person, a Greek person.
Okay.
And all the Greek folks out there are laughing because I just mangled his name. His name is Panayotis, but he is one of the world's leading plantsmen and seedsmen. And he discovered us, and he brought us into the Denver Botanic Gardens to start teaching. And we began teaching. They needed mountain representatives, because half of Colorado is not mountains, and Denver is not in the mountains. So we started teaching high-altitude growing classes, and then, of course, how to build these greenhouses and how to grow in them, which are two separate classes.
Right.
And, boy, it was amazing. Our classes would sell out every time, and because there were so many people in the mountains throwing their hands up going, what? Nothing works that I know how to do.
Right.
All the things I knew from Minnesota or New Jersey doesn't work here. And it's like, exactly, leave that behind and start with a clean slate.
Right.
And that was the beginning of a lot of things for us where, not just being recognized as teachers, but we learned so much by teaching and putting together what we do here.
Yeah. And
the greenhouses feel really good because so many people get their hearts broken out here in the West with their greenhouses that they buy out of a catalog or something, and they don't know what to do, and they put this money in, and now it's turned into a garden shed, and
right,
it's
exactly.
Like, empty it out, let's start over, we can do this, you can make it better. And we started teaching how to do this basically with salvaged materials and no money, because that's what we came from. But now we do a whole spectrum, because there's a lot of people out there who are willing to buy new materials or salvage some, buy some, a mixture, whatever, and make beautiful buildings that they want to match their home or whatever. They can, that's lovely too. And that's where it's led to. And so, when you look at the little greenhouse it could and our $150 and these gorgeous 65-foot greenhouses he's building for folks, there's been a lot of evolution in between there and learning, and then teaching. And Cord, it's interesting because you're teaching the thing that's your business.
Right.
But it's it's more important that we do that, because otherwise we're going to continue to use fuels for something we don't need to. Yeah. We need our fuel for other things that are more important. Greenhouses can run themselves. Mm-hmm. So, the consultations, Cord and I are both available for consultations. I mostly consult for greenhouse growing for folks that are struggling.
Growing,
right. Yeah, fully organic, but I can get in there and kind of feel the situation and help folks. But Cord does consultation on siting your greenhouse and building it, or he goes all the way through building it completely, or just coming and giving you a consultation to help you start. Mm-hmm. And that's been great because us folks in the mountains, we got to help each other. There's long distances between each other, so he'll go on a tour of consultations to go see folks and see their site and just get them started, because sometimes that's all they need is that little beginning push, because it can be head-scratching at first. I'm always on the way up. Get started. Even if you fail, get started.
Get started, yeah, and keep going. So classes. You offer classes in teaching people how to do this?
Yes, we offer classes on high-altitude gardening in all sorts of ways. I mean, at one point we had 15 different classes we taught at Denver Botanic Gardens. And in January coming up, we'll be teaching the greenhouse course, the greenhouse growing course, and then a big food growing course. It's mountain food growing, and it's like a 4-hour, we go over everything. There's so many things to consider up here in the wilderness that people don't know about. Even things as simple as open range, that you could have a 3,000-pound bull on your front doorstep.
Oh, right.
Chewing your entire garden if you live in an HOA. And if you really, because they lease the land to cattlemen to get the homeowners to have to pay less taxes.
Right.
So when you buy land in an HOA, if you don't have fencing, you're going to have to fence that cattle out of your garden.
Yeah.
And if you want to garden or grow, a greenhouse is often a great option for the bear, right? Because the bear can tear open anything.
Yep.
For all the wild animals we live with, a bull elk is 800 pounds on the hoof.
Oh, my gosh.
And if he comes in your garden, it's all gone that night.
Yeah.
Exactly. One night. And elk will attempt 8 feet, so you have to put up a 10 feet for elk, because they will attempt 8. And that is miraculous to me, that an 800-pound animal can hoist himself up in the air over an 8-foot fence.
Wow.
So, of course, we're deer fenced here. We don't have elk in our particular area, but we deer fence and they recommend 8 feet for deer. Mm-hmm. And so without that, the deer check the gate every day.
Do they really?
We would be... all day, every day.
Wow.
I poke my head out the front door. They're about 20 feet away from me. I go, girls, because it's usually does and their babies. Girls, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And they look at me, the gate's closed. We stand there in a standoff with my hands on my hips.
No kidding.
But these are the things that people forget about. They come up here and they say, I want to commune with nature. That's great. But if you have a garden, the deer are going to come eat it.
Right.
And I don't want fences. Well, there's all kinds of ways around that. You can just fence the bed, or just fence the little garden area away from your view, or feed the deer for a few years and then see how that is. Grow that vegetable garden and let them rip.
Let them at it, yes.
Because then you'll go, maybe I don't mind fence.
Right.
And, a lot of fence is see-through, especially here in the woods. I can barely see my fence because it's in the trees and I can look right through it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even bother me at all. But I get it. I understand. People move here. They have an idea, of how they want it to be, and then they didn't know anything about open range, or they didn't understand that they went into an HOA that wouldn't allow them to build a greenhouse or water outside from water restrictions. So those are all questions that we go over in class. Like, there's a lot of people come to our courses because they're planning to move to the wilderness or somewhere extreme. And so that little bit of tips of like, boy, I wish I knew this before I bought land somewhere where if I want to garden, I want to ask those questions. How deep are the wells around here?
Right.
What's the water like? And not all of us think that way when we're buying our property. We're thinking about our home.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to make food and grow, you've got to know. You've got to ask a lot of questions, and it's helpful to know just even those few things because, I can tell you a great story about an HOA. They released 12 retired rodeo bulls into the community to range them as range cattle.
Just range cattle.
And these bulls, they, as I always say, they had a bone to pick. No,
I'm sure.
And they were attacking people, and they can go through any fence. And because the open range laws are as they are, it took weeks and weeks to get the law to come and get these bulls out of there. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, they were chasing people around and tearing down fences and ruining people's gardens. And by the time they got there, most of them had hightailed it into the national forest and disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, whoa, I wonder what happened between the bull and the bear, right?
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
But that's a wild mountain story of what can happen in an HOA that you would never expect, that someone's going to graze 12 bulls in your front yard.
I just don't know what to say to that. That is just so.
I had to throw.
That's just so
I had to
far.
throw that in for.
Yeah, that's so far out of reality for me.
Right, and this is where we live. And I tell folks in class, if you have deer, you have lions. So remember, the lions don't want to be seen, but they're watching you.
Right.
So you should always be aware that there are predators around you.
Right.
And just having your baby in the garden with you at dusk, or it's something we think about here all the time. Right. And it's integrated because I'll share with the small critters, but a deer will take it all out. So it's hard to share with them. They're kind of piggy.
Yeah, you think?
They're not good guests.
Right. So also I see on your website you have a tab called greenhouses, and under that is order greenhouse plans. So
yes.
Tell us about that, because I'm sitting here looking. I want one of these in my backyard, and it's like, okay, I'm handy. I know how to build stuff. Wow, I could put in the little greenhouse that could. Yeah,
I know, and that's the simplest build. Yeah. Because if you notice, the roof angle just goes straight up. Mm-hmm. And on the other designs, it comes back down, and there's reasons for that as well. But that little one, that's a sweet design. And Cord is, he's so genius, and being a master blacksmith for 30 years, everything's got to be perfect, So getting the plans down, simplified enough that he felt wouldn't be too complicated for folks that aren't like him, that wants, every detail. And also, though, to be true to the design so that it will work. He wants success, for it to work. And that's why there's only 3 available right now, is because he's always evolving. He's always changing, right? And so he's always improving these designs. But those 3 are set, and we've proved them out. We know they work. Mm-hmm. And we've tried to keep them very reasonable, and so that, like I said, the average person like us, when we were in our 20s, it would have this. It's just, I want other young people and other people to have the same wonderful thing that happened to me.
Yeah.
I raised 3 boys in a tiny 800 square foot house, and without the little greenhouse that could, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what would have happened.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd go in there, shut the door, and it could be blizzarding. And I'm in this quiet green place, and I feel better. And I think, what do I have to complain about,
Yeah.
It's good for the soul.
Absolutely. So I would like for you to tell me your big why. Why do you do this?
I asked that of Cord earlier. He really feels that what these greenhouses can do is really making a difference. It can help the planet. Yeah. And what we see commercial greenhouses do it's so out of balance. It's so out of whack. Mm-hmm. How could anyone think that's okay to air condition it in the day and heat it at night in the same building? That it seems like we should be asking better questions. But this ability to be able to provide people with this super smart thing that's simple and smart is compelling. There's a fuel crisis, and we're all looking towards what we're going to do and how we can tread lightly on the planet.
Yeah.
And these greenhouses tread lightly on the planet. And I just wish, everybody could have one, or every community could have one, every school. Because remember, this is the problem with the school lunch problem, is that they can't grow a garden in the winter in most states. They do this in California brilliantly. But what if they had one of these greenhouses that the students built from the shop class and the physics class and the chemistry class and the math class, and they all help to understand how this is built, and they salvage and they come together as a community and they build this little greenhouse that feeds the school fresh, even fresh salad every day.
Right.
Would be this incredible input that would help them. And this is a reality. We did it for $150, and I'm not saying our state-of-the-art 65-foot greenhouses are $150. I'm saying that if we can do it and we can teach people, then maybe in their communities, more and more people could have these totally no-input buildings that give and give and give.
Yeah.
And then the kids could learn, so much. We were able to build one on a college campus at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and the students were they raised the money. It was their idea, and all of these students now are coming through there, learning that there are greenhouses available in the world that need no input, and that makes us so happy.
Beautiful.
It really does.
Beautiful.
Because Cord says, if I'm teaching what I do, I could teach myself out of a job. He goes, and you know what? That would be okay.
That would be okay.
It would be okay, because everyone would be doing this smart thing and getting all this benefit back. That's the thing. The greenhouses give more than I can tell you. They work better than I can tell you.
Beautiful. So, Penn, you keep talking about this book, the greenhouse book that Cord had found, and then it disappeared, and then it came back. Do you know what the name of it is that you can share it with us?
I do. It's an amazing book. It's called The Food and Heat Producing Solar Greenhouse, and it was written by Bill Yonda and Rick Fisher in '79. And I promise you, we put this book in your bathroom, and you'll be a genius too.
So, give us the name again. The
Food and Heat Producing Solar Greenhouse. It is out of print. It's an old book. Everybody finds it on Amazon. It looks like an old hippie book, and I call those guys, hippie geniuses. You'll see bell bottoms and culottes in there.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us on the show and sharing your experience with us today, Penn. It has been a treat chatting with you.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for letting me tell people about this. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah. So how can people get a hold of you?
Okay, well, our website is www.pennandcordsgarden.com, and that's spelled PENNANDCORDSGARDEN.com. And everything's on one website, and email us or call us up.
Perfect. So you can also find today's show notes for the podcast at urbanfarm.org/greenhouse. So you can be sure to check there for our recent podcast with Penn, also talking about her seeds and tomatoes. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for joining us on the Urban Farm Podcast. My favorite plant to grow in my yard is the fruit tree, because you plant it once and you get fruit for decades. If you have ever been curious on the best ways to be successful in growing fruit trees, today is your lucky day. Why? Because my team and I have compiled our best interviews and videos in one place to assist you in growing your own toe-tingling peaches and awesome apples right out your front or back door. Plus, as an added bonus, we've included an in-depth guide to successfully growing fruit trees in your yard. To get access to this information, it's free, by the way. Just go to urbanorchard.org or text FRUIT to 33444. That's urbanorchard.org or text FRUIT to 33444.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Urban Farm Podcast. Remember to listen 3 days a week for tips, advice, and resources to help you on your journey with urban farming. You can find us on the web at urbanfarm.org or send us an email to podcast@urbanfarm.org. In the words of Vincent van Gogh, great things are done by a series of small things brought together. Be encouraged that with each lesson learned and skill developed, you are one step closer in the direction of your dreams.